Yeah, my name is Jeremy Hetrick, and I'm the lead pastor at Redeeming Grace Church in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. We planted just a little over 2 years ago. And yeah, I went to the pastor's college back in 2002 to 2003, so the graduating class of 2003. Well, my wife and I were just married a little over a year, so we got married in December of 2000,
Okay.
and I had did a year of seminary. Even had a scholarship for full ride scholarship for 3 years, but after a year of seminary, realized that that wasn't a good fit for me. And my senior pastor at the church we were at that time sent us and actually asked us to consider going to the pastor's college, and it was just a lot of different experience than my seminary experience. So yeah, I was at first a little hesitant, partly because we had come in from outside of Sovereign Grace and just had a lot of questions. But as we got to just be more fully invested in our church, just saw our senior pastor at the time, and his character and his teaching and his equipping. And I just thought, wow, that's a little bit different than even guys I was, rubbing shoulders with in seminary. And as we talked more about it, and all the other people were just voicing their support for it, I said, you know what? I think we're supposed to do this. So we didn't have any children at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but we moved down to Gaithersburg at the time where it was, and we actually lived with a family, and that was a great experience. Well, I'm sure other people have said that there's relationships and friendships you form that last a lifetime in the pastor's college, and you're in it. You're kind of in the fiery furnace together, and so when you do that, you're in a furnace. It's just it's a time where you realize your weakness, and you realize, and other people are sharing their weakness, and it's just a wonderful time to learn greater dependence on the Lord. Exposes things in your heart, like your pride, even your unbelief, anxieties. How am I going to get this stuff done? It was more, to me, it was more rigorous than my seminary experience. And I know some people was like, well, how can 10 months produce a lot? Well, you really are drinking from the fire hose, and in a way, it humbles you. The Lord uses that to forge in you an endurance that you may not have had before. Seminary classes, you can come and go, and not really have much interaction with your class, even with your professors. But in a pastor's college, it's like these guys are pastors oftentimes that are coming in. We've had several, world-renowned theologians come in and teach as well, which was wonderful. But some of my favorite times are listening to Jeff Percival teach. You know, um, Being in a seminary, you get to see, great academics teaching classes and things like that. But Jeff weds two things together. It's not just academics, but it's also this passion for Christ. There are a number of times in our Gospels class, or I can just remember, I think it was we were looking at the Gospel of Luke or John or something like that, and he was just explaining something, and he was overwhelmed. And I'm overwhelmed just thinking about it because his affections for Christ and for God's word and the gospel came out clearly. And you don't often see that in someone as smart as Jeff. And that was the case for a number of our pastors that came in and taught. This is not just an academic exercise. It's kind of like John Piper talks about, expository exaltation. Yes, Jeff was doing that. Other pastors were doing that during the year, and seeing that it's basically exulting in that which they're teaching, and that's in the Lord. So it really was effective. It was a great experience in that way. Yeah, I think it helped me to grow in my character a lot, but also like the pastors coming in and teaching, they were actually applying this to pastoral ministry often. And so in an academic setting, it's great. I mean, there's a great place for seminary. In fact, I finished my Master of Divinity after I went to pastor's college years later. But it was, I think, that provided the pastor's college provided me much more of a pastoral foundation, and learning from these men who come in and they've been pastoring, and so they have these real life experiences. Even when I'm gone back to a pastor's college class just in the last couple of years, I'm being taught, the biblical counseling class, for example, taught by Andy Farmer, Pete Payne. They have real life experience as pastors in Sovereign Grace churches, and they can share stories of how this worked out in their setting. That's not often your experience in a seminary class. Sometimes I've had great professors in my seminary, but it just was more regular in the pastor's college. We're just a little over 2 years old as a church plant, and, I'm the only pastor, elder in our church, and I've been praying from the before we even planted that the Lord would raise up, other pastors, other elders. Mark Dever talks about, pray that the Lord would honor your church with other men raised up into eldership. And so I've been praying and investing, discipleship, leadership development, and, it became clear fairly early on to me that our the guy that we just sent to the pastors college this year had a level of gifting and character, and it was also coming from other people too that were affirming that. And so just walking carefully through that and just starting to explore conversations with him, and then also just getting out ahead of that with the church and explaining to the church, hey, this is where we're heading. We're heading towards a plurality of elders, but it takes one guy at a time, and this is a way through the pastors college that we can do that. So just want you to consider praying about this. And then also, I had already from the very beginning started a leadership development fund, which would fund some of our PC expenses or whatever for someone going to the pastor's college. So just trying to get out ahead of that, knowing this is an investment that we will get returns from. And so the guy that went to the pastor's college is Josh, and he's there right now with his wife and two kids. They just had their second during this past summer. But exploring this with them, it was good. It was a process, just learning, okay, when would it make sense? And also talking to him like, okay, his current position where he worked at his company, he has the ability to go back to that after the pastor's college. So for us, it's a little lower of a risk for him and for us. And also beyond that, just thinking in terms of finances, the church has actually really got behind this. So I just put it out there for the Leadership Development Fund, and their whole year, the church is really providing for them, which is amazing. And so it was not too difficult to make the decision, but I definitely miss him already, in different ways. But we have other guys who the Lord is, I think when we take risks like this, um, the Lord has a way of backfilling those things. And I see that. I have another young guy and his family. This young guy's like, so when can I go to the pastor's college? So we're just slowly going through this, but it's just amazing that where Josh left off with young adults, Trevor's taken over right now and moving that forward, and that ministry is growing. And so I think really you have to think about in terms of sowing and reaping. You sow out, you might not have someone backfilling right away, but you're sowing to something in the future that you just can't do locally. That's one of the things I've faced is I realize there's only so much investment I can do, especially as a single solo pastor. And so getting them up to that speed and then, okay, I took them to a pastor's college class last year to give them exposure to the pastor's college, talked with Brian Chesmore, talked with Steve Whitaker. And so it just was a great process to just onboard and get them to the pastor's college. And I look forward to the fruit that's going to come from this. I already got a chance to go down and visit with them for a week. I took a biblical theology class with Dr. Harmon, and that was phenomenal. And it was great to get a chance to see how Josh and his family is doing, and they're doing great. It is the fiery furnace. It is drinking from the fire hose kind of thing, but it's doing well, and it's just exciting. And I can't wait. They're coming back for Thanksgiving and gonna give an update to our church, and I think it's going to be a strengthening and encouragement to our church, even in this little visit with them.